There's nothing today. That's right. It's nice to see that we're now growing some of our own flowers again. Some of the hyacinths are coming up. It's good. It's a big opulence to be able to grow our own flowers for the deities. So, first of all, we'll just read from Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrita. This is the condensed version. The original one's in 6 volumes. This is the abridged condensed version. So we're on this chapter called Let There Be a Temple, Part 2. And we're in Mumbai, where Mr. N is trying to cheat the devotees out of the land that they were purchasing. He wants his cake and eat it. In the end, he gets nothing because he's playing with the wrong person here. Thus, the plan of Mrs. N and her lawyers backfired. Although they had been thinking they were dealing with only a mere handful of young foreigners, they soon found themselves facing many of Bombay's most influential citizens. So prior to this, we were talking about a Save the Temple committee. Srila Prabhupada predicted that the results would be positive. A few days after the incident, he wrote, "The demolition of our temple by the municipality has strengthened our position." So Mr. N had got the authorities to demolish whatever they'd started to build in Bombay, Juhu. The municipality standing committee has condemned the hasty action of the municipality and has agreed to reconstruct the shed at their cost. Not only that, the temporary construction shall continue to stay until the court decision is there as to who is the proprietor of the land. Under the circumstances, we should immediately reconstruct the deity shed. Barbed wire fencing should be immediately done to cover the naked land, and if possible, immediately in front of the deity shed. A temporary pandal should be constructed with our materials. If it is so done, then I can go to Bombay and begin Bhagavat Parayan to continue until the court decision is there. And this is my desire. The devotees began to see the entire course of events as Krishna's mercy, since many life members were now rendering valuable service to Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. In the past, Prabhupada had stayed in the homes of many life members, preaching to them and their families, convincing them of his sincerity and of the noble aims of his movement. These friends and members like Bhagubhai Patel, Biharilal Kandelwala, Brijratan Mohat, Dr. C. Bali, and others were acting not simply out of Hindu sentiment, but out of deep respect and affection for Prabhupada. Giriraj, working with Sada Jiwatlal, tried to convince municipal council to authorize the rebuilding of the temple structure. While doing so, however, he discovered that Mrs. N had that very day, a Friday, filed for a court injunction preventing ISKCON from rebuilding. Justice Nayan told Giriraj that he did not want to grant Mrs. N's request and that he would hear the devotee's case on the following Monday. This meant that the devotees had from Saturday morning to Monday morning 2 days to rebuild the temple. That's quite a typical ISKCON thing, getting thrown in a deep end. And just as you think you're about ready to swim, then a couple of sharks get thrown in for good measure. Krishna doesn't let us off easy. If you think we're going to have a breeze back to Godhead, then we've got to wake up from that. But Krishna's always there to catch, as we'll see here. This is sometimes how the Lord glorifies his devotee, is he puts them under pressure, and then they continue regardless of what, and they don't give up. And in this way, the Lord strengthens his devotees and glorifies them. He's not trying to make life difficult for them for the sake of it. He's not like some kind of sadist. Well, lots of living entities, let's have fun with them. Watch them chasing their tails around the material world. Okay, Mr. Lal, a former... The devotees reasoned that although they had no actual permission to rebuild the temple, there was as yet no law to stop them. If Justice 9 ruled against them, then to rebuild would be very difficult. They decided, therefore, to use the weekend to rebuild. Mr. Lal, a former contractor, helped arrange materials, bricks, mortar, asbestos sheets. Mr. Sethi offered a crew of labourers. At 8 p.m. on Friday, the masons began their work, continuing throughout the night despite the rain. And on Monday morning, when the judge learned of the new temple, he declared, "What is built is built. No one can destroy the temple." When Prabhupada heard the news, he considered a complete victory. The temple had been rebuilt and public opinion was swinging strongly in ISKCON's favour. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16, entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Lord. Text number 6. Yata Vastuni Panyani. Yata Vastuni Panyani. Himadini Tatas Tata. Himadini Tatas Tata. Paryatanti Nareshu Evam. Paryatanti Nareshvevam. Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu. Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu. Yatavastuni Panyani. Himadini Tatastata. Paryatanti Nareshvevam. Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu. Yatavastuni Panyani. Himadini Tatastata. Paryatanti Nareshvevam. Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu. Yatavastuni Panyani. Himadini Tatastata. Paryatanti Nareshvevam. Jivo Yonishu Kartrishu. Please chant. Ladies. Yata, just as. Vastuni, commodities. Panyani, meant for trading. Hema Adini, such as gold. Tata Tata, from here to there. Paryatanti, move about. Nareshu, among men. Evam, in this way. Jiva, a living entity. Yonishu, in different species of life. Kartrishu, in different material fathers. Translation: just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of its fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. Please repeat: just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another in due course of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe, being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. Prabhupada's purport. It has already been explained that Chitraketu's son was his enemy in a past life and had now appeared as his son just to give him more severe pain. Indeed, the untimely death of the son caused severe lamentation for the father. One may put forward the argument, if the king's son was his enemy, how could the king have so much affection for him? In answer, the example is given that when someone's wealth falls into the hands of his enemy, the money becomes the enemy's friend. Then the enemy can use it for his own purposes. Indeed, he can even use it to harm its previous owner. Therefore, the money belongs neither to the one party nor to the other. The money is always money, but in different situations it can be used as an enemy or a friend. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, it is not by any father or mother that the living entity is given his birth. The living entity is a completely separate identity from the so-called father and mother. By the laws of nature, the living entity is forced to enter the semen of a father and be injected into the womb of the mother. He is not in control of selecting what kind of father he will accept. Prakrite kriyamanani. The laws of nature force him to go to different fathers and mothers. Just like a consumer commodity that is purchased and sold. Therefore, the so-called relationship of father and son is an arrangement of prakriti or nature. It has no meaning, and therefore it is called illusion. Same living entity sometimes takes shelter of an animal father and mother, and sometimes a human father and mother. Sometimes he accepts a father and mother among the birds. Sometimes he accepts a demigod father and mother. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore says, Mandi Brahmati Kona Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Bij. Harassed life after life by the laws of nature, the living entity wanders throughout the entire universe in different planets and different species of life. Somehow or other, if he is fortunate enough, he comes in touch with a devotee who reforms his entire life. Then the living entity goes back home, back to God. Therefore, it is said, Janame Janame Sabi Pita Matapaya Krishna Guru Nahi Mili Bhaja Hariye. In the transmigration of the soul through different bodies, everyone in every form of life, be it human, animal, tree, or demigod, gets a father and mother. That is not very difficult. The difficulty is to obtain a bona fide spiritual master in Krishna. Therefore, the duty of the human being is to capture the opportunity to come in touch with Krishna's representative, bona fide spiritual master. Under the guidance of the spiritual master, the spiritual father, one can return home back to Godhead. Om Agyanatamirandasya Gyananjana Slakaya Chakshurmilitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vikam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Garim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Garim Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Goda Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Just as gold and other commodities are continually transferred from one place to another because of purchase and sale, so the living entity, as a result of his fruitive activities, wanders throughout the entire universe being injected into various bodies in different species of life by one kind of father after another. So it's a nice analogy given here that while we're in the possession of gold or some other commodity, we're thinking it's ours and that we have some claim to it. And so much is that illusion that people think they have some control of it even after their death. We see in some previous civilizations, people would be buried with their wealth because they'd be taking it with them to their afterlife. And wherever they get that idea from, I don't know, because there was never any evidence that it was gone. So probably somebody who wanted their wealth told them, yeah, you can bury it and take it with you. And then once they were gone, they'd just like sneak in and take it or something. But they had such a strong misconception of a false sense of proprietorship that they were thinking all these things they were accumulating, they were taking with them. And they're full of so much self-importance that they want to create big statues of themselves and something to be remembered by. But what's the value of it? Because they won't even be there to enjoy it. It's like sometimes people say, oh, at my funeral, I want this and I want that. And like, well, you won't be there anyway to enjoy it. What's the point? So people are waking up to this. They're quite happy just to get put in a cardboard box and then ashes to ashes. Of course, for devotees, that's different because the Lord's pure devotee, his body is used in Krishna's service, and that should be respected. When Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, spiritual master, Gorkishore Das Babji Maharaj, he told his disciple that when I pass away, then just have the body dragged through the streets and be fed to the jackals and the dogs. And some foolish people thought, okay, this is what he wanted, this is what we should do. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who was his only disciple, stood against it. He stood and says, no one shall touch the body of my spiritual master. He says, any of you who have not broken the principles in the last year, step forward. So anyway, who've not broken it in the last day, it kind of went from day, a year to a month to week to day. And so nobody was actually able to step forward. He says, so nobody can touch the body of this pure devotee. Out of this humility, then Gorkishore Das Babji Maharaj says, this body is just fit for the jackals and dogs, just feed it to them. But his disciple didn't see it like that. He didn't discard his spiritual master's body. This is called Tadiya. So Tadiya is Parvati once asked Lord Shiva, what is the most worshipable thing? Aradhananam Sarvesham. And he replied that the most worshipful thing is Vishnu, and more than that is Vishnu Tadiya, and that which is related to Vishnu. And that includes the devotees especially. They're related to Vishnu, so they're very dear to the Lord. So just as the devotees, what's that verse? Ebaro Karuna Koro Vaishnava Gosai. So in that bhajan, it's mentioned that Govinda is in the heart of the devotees. So just like we learned that it's who's in the heart along with the Jivatma. Yeah, and what type of Vishnu is he known as? So he's he's super soul within the heart. So Mangalananda sings a song, O Govinda within my heart. He doesn't say, O Kirodakashai Vishnu within my heart, celestial herdsman, lotus-eyed one. He doesn't sing that song. He says, O Govinda within my heart. So Govinda is in the heart of the devotee because that is his meditation. The devotee is always meditating on the Lord. The purpose of the devotee's serving is to remember the Lord. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smarnam. So by hearing and chanting, we're remembering the Lord. So those on a particular path, they will remember Vishnu, but we're being encouraged to remember Krishna. That's the blessing of Srila Prabhupada. And also in that bhajan, it says that the Vaishnavas are in the heart of Govinda. So they're very dear to the Lord. And in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains Yam Yam Vapi Smaram Bhavam, that whatever we think of at the time of death, that state we will attain. So naturally, whatever we're most attached to is what we'll think of at the time of death. So when we come to Krishna consciousness at first, we bring so much baggage with us. And no one can force us to give up that baggage. No one can take it off us. We have to come to that point ourselves. We can all help each other. We try to remind each other, you're carrying unnecessary baggage. And this lifetime is a preparation for recognizing what is unnecessary baggage and dropping it off. And some of the things we have as baggage we can use in Krishna's service. It's not necessarily baggage, but if it's used in the wrong way, it can be baggage. So just like here it's mentioned that wealth, it transforms from one person to another, and it can be the source of good fortune or bad fortune, can be the source of joy or misery. If our wealth falls into the hands of an enemy, that enemy, we may first of all become upset, jealous, or angry that the enemy's got it, but then the enemy could even use that to make things even more difficult for us. So this is a typical thing in the material world. The very thing which is the source of our pleasure becomes the source of our misery. Why is that? Can anyone say? Yeah, and that's because, and it causes us joy and distress because we are attached to it. So when it comes along, we think, oh, this is great, we embrace it. And then when it's taken away, then we have some problem. But if we're detached, like sometimes Prabhupada would be given very expensive gifts. Like I've seen one picture before I joined. I seen some BTG and I was reading it and I thought it was quite good teachings. And then I seen a picture of Prabhupada and he had a big expensive watch on. And I was thinking, no, surely a renounced monk wouldn't have that on. In my critical mind, in my naivety. And then as I began to learn more about Krishna consciousness, then I learned that Prabhupada would be given things like this, but he would just give them away as easy. He wasn't attached to it. And the problem was mine. I was attached. I was thinking, that if I had that, then I wouldn't be very spiritual. But Prabhupada used it in Krishna's service, and then he gave it to someone. So many times people would give him rings. He'd wear it just for the sake of wearing it, so that the person who gave it gets some benefit. There's even a story of, it might have been at Bhaktivedanta Manab, there was one time where Prabhupada was given these shoes, and he would never wear them, but devotee went in to massage him, and he seen Prabhupada wearing them, lying asleep on his bed that night, just for the sake of engaging them to benefit the person who gave them. So this is the mood of the Sankirtan devotee, that whatever people give, if we can possibly use it in Krishna's service so that people get benefited. Even someone gives you a penny, if you're out on books and someone tries to insult you by giving a penny. Like there's that story of the sannyasi who was doing madhukari. Anybody know what madhukari is?
Or food with bowl in hands.
And why is it called madhukari?
It's like
Is it supposed to be like a bee? You take a little nectar from every house.
Yeah, Madhu means honey. So the bee takes a little nectar from each flower. It doesn't just go to one flower. It's not lazy. It doesn't say, well, instead of flying around all day, let me just get everything from this flower and then I can go back and put my feet up. He's not thinking like that. He takes a little bit from this flower, a little from that flower. Then it means next day he can come back again. So the bee is also one of spiritual masters because he's shown us how to take from the Lord's creation and not destroy it. So Madhu Kari means like to do, like karo, like JJ karo sometimes. And then parents will tell their kid to do JJ, which means they clap their hands. Or they say something or other, karo, jaldi karo. Come on, hurry up. So to do something. So Madhukari means to do that activity of the bee. So the sannyasi was going door to door doing Madhukari and they would beg. So the sannyasi has a sannyas vesh, he has a begging cloth here. And traditionally they would go beg on some doors. Sometimes they would just beg until they get enough to eat. Generally they're not supposed to beg lots and then accumulate. They're not supposed to do that. And some of them, they'll give themselves so many doors. They'll say, okay, I'll just go to 10 doors and whatever I get in those 10 doors, that's what we eat today. And sometimes they'll have 5. And then I think it was Kinchana Das Babji Maharaj, who's a very renounced devotee. Then him and his disciple, they were doing some Madhukari and he said, okay, we'll just do 3 doors today. Whatever the Lord gives, that's what we'll take. So he went to the first door, got nothing. He says, oh, I can't be bothered with this, let's just fast. Imagine that was your temple commander or your Sankirtan leader. What's for prasadam? We'll go door to door and see what we can get. We'll do these 3 doors, whatever they give us. First door, nothing, I'll forget it. And that's not because they were just like performing austerities for the sake of trying to impress people. Because they were so absorbed in Krishna consciousness, they were thinking this bodily maintenance is such a distraction, I can't be bothered with it. Let's just chant, let's just read, let's just get into Krishna consciousness. Maintaining this body is just a distraction. Like the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they were so absorbed in Krishna consciousness that sometimes they'd forget to sleep. Now we may not sleep, but we don't forget about it. It really plays on our mind. And if we don't get enough sleep, then the mind and the attachment become very strong if we don't sleep. So we have to be careful of that. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one cannot be a yogi if you don't eat enough, or if you eat too much, or if you don't sleep enough, or you sleep too much. So we have to be balancing these activities. So as this sannyasi was going door to door, someone came to the door and they think, oh, who's this disturbance? Let's just make fun of them. So he says, yes, I've got a donation for you. So the sannyasi waited. And the person came back and he put some ashes on his begging cloth. And then the sannyasi says, oh, thanks very much. And he says, oh, I was trying to make fun of you. Why are you thanking me? He says, because at least you've started to give something. So he accepted it. This was his mood. He could have took offense and then threw it back in his face or, turned on his heel and cursed him or whatever. But he was just thinking so much of the person's welfare. He wanted the person to do something. So at least the person took the trouble to go away and bring something and give it to him. Just like Putana. She came with poison smeared on her breast with intent to kill Krishna, but Krishna was thinking, oh, here's my mother coming to feed me. Let me accept this service. And he gave her liberation. So this is Krishna's mood. He's always wanting to benefit the living entities. And especially as Lord Chaitanya, then Krishna is in a very compassionate frame of mind. He's taking on the mood of Srimati Radharani, explained in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that Radharani is always one eye on Krishna and one eye on the living entities, because she's always thinking for their welfare. How can we get these living entities reinstated in the Lord's service? And the Guru Parampara, this is the Guru Parampara, basically they're recommending devotees for the Lord's service. Srimati Radharani does this too, although she's the greatest devotee. She's always saying, well, Krishna, here's this wonderful devotee, please accept our service. And the spiritual master is doing that also. He's trying to train us so that we can become servants of Krishna. So sometimes the spiritual master will say, no, not like this, like this. And if we argue, how are we going to know? How are we going to learn? Oh, but I think it should be like this. Okay, then stay in the material world if that's what you want to do. So the example is given when the spiritual master asks for water, then you don't go away and think, milk's better than water, so I'll get him some milk. And then you bring the milk, and she says, I can't take milk. I've got a certain ailment, milk. Ask for water. He might not even wanted to drink the water. He might have wanted to wash his hands or something. So we have to listen carefully to what he's saying and do that. And therefore, interpretation is not such a good thing. So therefore, it's necessary that we hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly in the association of devotees, and we hear with rapt attention. So falling asleep is not with rapt attention. Letting the mind wander is not with rapt attention. We're just trying to hear, keep on bringing the mind back, just like with our japa. When we're chanting the holy names, the mind wanders, and we find ourselves doing something else, like we're wandering down memory lane. Oh, I remember, we're chanting externally, we're going Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. It's just going on. We don't even know what we're chanting. And then we're just thinking of something we used to do in the past. Oh, material world wasn't so bad. I remember I used to do that. Oh, I missed this. We go down the memory lane thing. Or we just become, passionate about something else. Oh, I need to remember to do this, I need to remember to do that. We're planning everything, in our japa. And at the end of japa comes, we forget it all. It was just a big distraction by Maya. So sometimes if you're careful, you can trace back, where you ended up, and you try to say, well, what made me think of that? What made me think of that? And then you come back and it was just some apparent innocent distraction from the holy name, and it just ends up in thinking something gross. So not that we have to trace it back, but sometimes you can do that just for the sake of realizing, well, what appeared to be an innocent thought or a slight distraction just led to something else. But Krishna says, wherever it wanders, he's not holding it against us. It's not like he's going to... I remember one devotee saying that if we had the ability to, during japa, to project our mind onto the temple wall, then we would probably chant some very attentive japa. Maybe some of you do already. So Krishna, he's not concerned with where it wanders. He's just saying, wherever it wanders, just bring it back. It's not like, well, you've wandered there, don't bother coming back to me. He's wherever it wanders, just bring it back. Even if you're the most sinful of all sinners, when you're situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you become indifferent to all that has been heard. So in other words, he's telling us we are actually nothing to do with this material world. And we take a lot of convincing, even though we hear it and somewhat believe it, we take a lot of convincing because we've fortified that resolve that I am this body. And we forget that we had the same resolve for the previous body. We're so adamant I am this previous body. And the one before that, I am this dog's body, I am this ant's body, I am this starfish body, elephant, tree, nice smelling flower, taking all the compliments. Oh, this jasmine smells very nice. I'm thinking, yes, this is me. I'm smelling very nice. And then next body, hog. So just we're attached to praise and blame. As we're attached to praise, then the amount of we're affected by that will also be the same with blame. So just as this illusion of false sense of proprietorship is there with wealth, then same with our relatives. We think this is my mother, my father, my brother, sister, children, so many other relatives. But they're also temporary, just as the temporary wealth we have. And as whatever our karma happens to be, then that is what's going to come, and that we should use in Krishna's service. If our karma is not so great, then it doesn't matter. Or if our karma is great, it doesn't matter. Whatever we have, we use in Krishna's service. There are some devotees who are extremely wealthy. Like there's one devotee in Italy called Matsya Avatar. He's a spiritual master. He's an extremely famous and wealthy person in Italy. And I can't remember what was his line of business. I think it was some like really high-end furniture was one of his things. And he would give them different Krishna names. But he's a devotee and he's a spiritual master. You know, it hasn't stopped him because he's using everything in Krishna's service. And then some other devotees, they may not have much, but still they're using everything in Krishna's service. So whatever we have, we use it in Krishna's service. In this way, we're all performing this Atmanivedanam, giving everything in Krishna's service, whether everything is a lot or a little. So it's from the heart. So from the heart doesn't mean to say, sometimes you see people saying, you know, they give a donation of like 10p and they say that's from the heart. So, well, your heart must be pretty, heart must be pretty poor. So in that instance, Krishna doesn't see what we're giving; he sees what we're holding back. And of course, Krishna doesn't need it. Just like Bhataram Pushpam Palam Toyam, Krishna doesn't need any food from us. It's not like he's going to starve. Sometimes the demons have this conception that Vishnu is maintained by the sacrifices of the Brahmins. So if we kill the Brahmins and stop the sacrifices, then Vishnu will die. This is their faulty mentality, but they don't understand the full picture that Vishnu never dies. He has no beginning and no end. He cannot be killed. But in their enmity towards Vishnu, then they think, aha, finally we found a way where we can finish off Vishnu. So we identify with present circumstances and we experience some happiness and distress from it. But at the same time, some kind of false sense of renunciation is not encouraged either, because that just simply leads to hard-heartedness if we falsely renounce things. So Yukta Vairagya, or the spirit of renunciation of Yukta Vairagya, is we understand Bhoktaram, Jagatapasam, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, not me. We like to think we are. We attempt to be the supreme enjoyer. But as devotees of Krishna, we do enjoy when we serve Krishna because we're not poor, we're not struggling, we're not starving. You know, we're not really in want of anything. And all we have to do is continue with engaging in devotional service. Krishna looks after all of our needs. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, he's the Lord of everything. So we have a little sense of controllership, and we can extend our control a little bit, but not too far. Because if we try to extend it too far, then someone will resist it. And Suridam Sarvabhutanam, sometimes people like to be the center of attention, but Krishna is actually the only real center of attention. Just like there was one devotee who came to stay here. I knew him from years ago, and nice devotee, but he's got a kind of tendency to always want to be center of attention and hold court and just be like the life and soul of the party. And I took him aside once and I just said, look, just remember, Krishna's the center of attention. We're a simple community. We don't want any funky philosophies. And we just, the deities and Srila Prabhupada, they're the center of the community here. So it was okay for a while. Just like all of us, you know, we can behave ourselves for a bit. And this happens in the material world. You know, Maya chastises us, and we get a wake-up call, and then we behave ourselves for a bit. And then as soon as the spirit of enjoyment comes back, then we want to enjoy again. We forget that it caused us suffering. So when the living entity is misbehaves in this material world, then we come under the influence of Maya Devi. material nature. And just as the mother sometimes sends the child to the room if they're naughty, go to your room, then Prabhupada was saying that if we are misbehaving in the material world, and Mother Nature says, go to your womb. She sends us to a particular womb. Okay, you want to behave like this? It's not what a human does. You're behaving like, I don't know, a dog or a rhino or something like that. Whatever the mentality is, whatever the mix of material modes of nature we choose, then we get a body suited for that. Krishna says, okay, so you want to behave like that, you've got the wrong body, I'll give you the body for that, that's what you want. So Krishna is detached. His desire is that we come back to him and we enjoy eternally. But he also respects our desires, so if we want to ignore him and we want to do something else and try being a giraffe or something like that, or some other living entity, we don't know what kind of strange desires may give us some strange body. The living entity is always trying to be unique in some way, but the modes of material nature, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just there's 8,400,000 species of life. We're not going to create a new one. They're already there. And we simply choose what modes we want to be. It's like you go into a shop, a sweet shop, and whatever they've got in the shop, that's what your money can buy. They can't sell you something else they don't have. It isn't there. So in the material world, you've got your choices. You pay your money and you take your choice. So paying our money means we have a freedom of choice. We invest our time, we invest our consciousness. And Krishna never takes that freedom away from us. Though sometimes the devotee will pray like that. Just like Ashish Prabhu was saying the other day, he's praying that he takes away our freedom to choose. So although Krishna will never do that, but he may put things in there just to keep us right. We pray to the Lord to protect us. Sometimes this is what happens, and then we get frustrated and we're forgetting that we prayed for some protection and the Lord is protecting us. So when the devotee is under the care of the Lord, sometimes it looks even just like they're suffering like normal, like they have a cold or they get COVID or some other disease, even fatal. It can appear like, well, you're just suffering like normal people. There's a big difference, and there's a nice analogy. Does anybody remember one analogy which explains the difference?
Like the orphan son versus the son of a rich man. I can't remember all the details, but although they may externally seem to be in the same circumstance, the son of a rich man is cared for, whereas the orphan has just been put out in the street.
Mm-hmm. That's the next one. There's another one I was thinking of. Does anyone remember another one? There's one with the cat, and the mouth of the cat is a kitten, which has been cared for by mother cat. And in the mouth of the cat at another time is a rat, and it's experiencing the jaws of death. So on the outside, it looks like both have been carried in the mouth of the cat, and it looks like either they're both being cared for or they're both, in trouble. So this is what it looks like externally, but the difference is one is being cared for and one is not. So this is the difference between a devotee under the care of the Lord. It's not that we won't suffer. It's not like, okay, I've been a devotee for 3 months now. Why am I still getting a cold? Why did I stub my toe on the door? So sometimes we might think like that because we're coming to Krishna for relief, and that's one of the bona fide approaches of Krishna. And Krishna allows these different approaches. It's not like, well, don't come to me unless you're a pure devotee. Because approach to Krishna is what's going to help us become a pure devotee. He says, the Sanskrit. So Krishna says, whatever we approach him for, whether it be with no desire, with all desires, with desire for liberation, moksha kama udaradi, then by all means we approach Krishna, because even if we approach for the wrong reason, then the right reason will emerge in due course. And that example of Dhruva Maharaj is often given that he wanted the darshan of Lord Vishnu so he could get a benediction to have a kingdom greater than Lord Brahma. He approached for the wrong reason, but he got a bona fide spiritual master, Narada Muni, and he got the darshan of Lord Vishnu, and when Lord Vishnu appeared there, Dhruva Maharaj was stunned, he couldn't speak. And Lord Vishnu touched his head with his conch, and then he said all these wonderful prayers. And in one of those prayers he said, I was looking for some pieces of broken glass, but I found the priceless gem. So when we come to Krishna consciousness, at first we may have so many conditions, so many ideas or opinions, etc. But we should do ourselves a favour by trying to let go of these things. And just as has been mentioned yesterday, that in order for the new self, the true self to emerge, the old self has to die. Just like the caterpillar has to give up its old skin to become a butterfly. So this is the change of heart. The change of heart is now let me do everything for Krishna. I've been doing it for me, and I've been doing it for other people, but also doing it for other people for me. This is called extended selfishness. If we do it for other people and they don't appreciate it, then I don't want to know them. How long do we do something for someone else and they don't appreciate it? So we're looking for something. But still, even if we approach Krishna looking for something, that's because it's conditional. We're not expected to immediately just learn everything overnight. But by regular hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, then gradually all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed to practically zero, and all that remains is pure devotional service that is established as an irrevocable fact. It says practically to nil. It doesn't say completely, because practically means we still have freedom of choice. Because even one gets to very advanced stage of devotional service, one can still choose to turn away from Krishna. So this is the thing about love. You cannot force someone to love. So having been through so many species of life, as Prabhupada was mentioning, the purport Brahmanda Bhamati Konya Bhagavana Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Bij. Throughout the material universe, we've been wandering through different species, sometimes enjoying life as a demigod, sometimes suffering as some lower species, living in fear, etc., living in opulence, living in poverty. We've experienced it all. We cannot remember it, but it's there. And so after coming to a certain point where we're frustrated and we feel like there's nothing in this material world that does it for me, even if I try, it just doesn't do it for me, then we realize, okay, there's only one place to go, that's Krishna. Unfortunately, sometimes we think there is something in the material world for us, so therefore we have to purify our intelligence by reading, chanting, and serving in Rishikesha, Rishikenam, Sevanam Bhakti Ruchite, by engaging the senses in the service of Krishna, Rishikesh, the master of the senses. So Krishna is pure, and when we come in contact with Krishna through devotional service, through hearing, chanting, engaging in so many different services, remembering, etc., then our senses become pure, our mind becomes pure, and intelligence becomes pure, and then the mind becomes our friend. It starts saying, instead of like, oh, why don't you just go to the movies? You're supposed to be in Sankirtan, but nobody will notice you've done a good score. Just slip off. Let's go and buy yourself a cream bun or something. So instead of the mind coming up with ideas like that, it'll come up with ideas like, hey, if you do this, then you get more time in for Sankirtan. If you stop spacing out, you go on the street earlier. Or if you just jump out of bed, make a plan instead of like, oh no, there's an alarm clock before we go to bed. So when I was in the Bhakti program, there was a devotee called Back to Jake. He was the son of a famous guy. Anyone remember a band called Manfred Mann? what was his name? John Paul Jones? I think that was it. So the guy who was the main guy of that band, his son was Jake. He was a Bhakta at Chaitanya College with us. I shared a room with him. And he was a real great devotee of Tamas Gun, the mode of ignorance. He loved sleeping so much. Before he joined, he used to sleep 12 hours a day. And we said to him, so how do you feel? Well, after you sleep so much, you feel refreshed? He says, no, I feel tired. So anyway, he was really struggling to stay awake because typically there's so many things we're cold turkeying from the material world, including sleeping too much. And he'd be falling asleep in class. We used to, at the back to program facilities, we had a classroom, we had a mat, and you'd have a low table, a bit lower than that, maybe about 6 inches lower. And every now and again, you would just hear this thud. His head would just bang off the table. And even in temple room, and he'd stand up during the lecture because he was falling asleep, and it, occasionally it'd be like timber, he'd crash over. He was so tired. So eventually, the back leader says, "Okay, we need to give him more sleep. He's just not managing it." He was so fired up that he was practically diving into an ocean of nectar. He went like this, and he dived into his bed, and then he got back out and he says, "I'm going to do that again." It was so good. So he did it again. He didn't last, of course. But we have to gradually try to reduce whatever attachment it may be. We can face it up and just say, okay, yeah, I'm attached to this and I'm attached to that. It's not unexpected because, in the material world, everybody's attached to pretty much the same thing. It's not as what we're attached to is something completely unique and it's going to shock everybody because it's pretty much the same thing, just different flavors of different things, same thing. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending kind of comes under these categories. Or some other kind of mental concoction related to these. But the idea is to try to gradually reduce these to zero. And by engaging in Krishna's service, we purify everything so that we naturally, the mind will start giving ideas how we can improve on these things. And then we start relating to, instead of our body, our mind, our family, etc., we start relating more and more to consciousness, to the association of devotees, the spiritual master's instructions. And then basically what we're doing is transferring our attachment from the mundane to the transcendental, and then that attachment is actually the source of our liberation. So I went over. If anyone's got any quick questions.
Hare Krishna, Guru, thank you. Before you touched on this idea of false renunciation or premature renunciation, I'm wondering if you could comment how, because obviously with renunciation there's going to come some tapasya, that's part of spiritual life, is some austerity. How to know if we've taken on too much, because it's always going to be a bit difficult. But...
Yeah. Well, if you're not sure, you can always ask somebody. So there were some occasions where Prabhupada had indicated to the devotees that their austerity was unnecessary. So it's really if it's ordained, then it's necessary. A couple of quick examples. One devotee was getting a reputation for being quite austere. He was fasting. And Prabhupada told him, he says, you should take more prasadam, because he was looking quite lean. And Prabhupada also had a motivation to instruct his disciple and to instruct others by instructing this disciple. So he told him to eat. And he says, eat more, eat heartily. So 6 months later, the devotee went from being thin to being quite plump. And then he called the devotee and he says, now fast. And the disciple was like, oh, I don't want to fast. He says, oh, you can fast when you want to, but when the spiritual master wants you to fast, you cannot fast. So Prabhupada waited all that time to teach him the lesson, but of course he was teaching everybody. So the point is, why are you fasting when the spiritual master says take prasad? And if the spiritual master says to fast, then we don't take prasad. Generally, the spiritual master will take care of the devotees in such a way that he doesn't make them feel unnecessarily uncomfortable, but sometimes uncomfortableness may be there because there's something greater at risk. So if we decide, okay, I'm only going to, it's like there was one devotee decided he was going to give up sleeping. He said this while he was in the car, and he'd no sooner had the words come out his lips, but he was fast asleep. And he woke up, and the devotee said to him, so how's that going for you then? What do you mean? You just slept for the last half hour. So false renunciation means it's something which is unnecessary. There was another example where another devotee was fasting and he was chanting extra rounds. Now, in the beginning, Prabhupada wanted the devotees to chant 64 rounds. But then he said, okay, 16 is acceptable, but you must engage in devotional service throughout the day. Otherwise, simply your mind will be disturbed. You'll become distracted. So we have to engage in devotional service. And he said, if you simply just stay back and read and chant all day, then your mind will just be attracted to sex life. You just think of sex life and fall down. So Prabhupada knew it was important with the Western folks who are quite passionate. They need to have some engagement. They need to feel as if they're doing something, they're creating something, achieving something. And they can do all that for Krishna. So this devotee decided himself that he was going to chant extra rounds. And then he was also getting some recognition for this. And people were coming to Prabhupada saying, oh, such and such Dasa is chanting 32 rounds a day. Now he's chanting 50 rounds a day. Oh, now he's chanting 64 rounds a day. Now he wants to live in a tree. Sorry, I forgot to ask. I'm terrible at telling jokes or stories. He says, yeah, he wants to chant 34 rounds. He wants to chant 50 rounds. Now he wants to chant 64 rounds. Now he wants to live in a tree. And Prabhupada says, I want. There's simply sense gratification. Now, prior to that, the devotees were thinking, oh, this devotee is great, he's amazing. But Prabhupada just smashed it. He says, I want. He said, it's not great. It's just, I want. This is just subtle sex life. So we should do things for the purpose of progressing in Krishna consciousness. We can increase. So in regards to austerity, then Prabhupada said preaching is our austerity. And we think, well, sometimes that's not austere, sometimes it's just nectar. You go to a program and you're speaking and Krishna's giving you the mercy and you're saying the things which people are happy to hear. And there's nice prasadam, there's nice people there and you think, well, it's not very austere. But then you go to another program and you get some challenges there, or the prasadam is not so good, or everything's good but your mind is not in a good state. Or sometimes to get there, you have to maybe do some long drive, or there's a detour, and it's very austere, or you forgot something, like we did Ratha Yatra last year, and the PA system was all set up and everything was looking good, but it just wouldn't work. So that was an austerity because we had to try to figure out how to make something work. A lot of people were counting on it. And then there was one time, Hari Sauri Prabhu said to Prabhupada, he wanted to go on some preaching program. Prabhupada was sick, and Hari Sauri, his personal servant, would say, no, but Prabhupada, you're sick. Perhaps you can stay back and someone else can go. He says, no, I want to go. He says, but Prabhupada, it's too austere. He says, preaching means austerity. So devotees are willing to take austerity if it means going out in Krishna's name. And sometimes it's austere because the weather's not good, or our mind is not good, or we're going to a place where somebody wants to go and we don't want to go there, but we have to go there. Or we want to do something else. So this is surrender. This type of austerity is surrender. So Prabhupada said regarding surrender that sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do. And sometimes we don't get to do things that we want to do. Is that okay? All right, we better stop there. It's going to go to ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.
His Grace Prabhupada Prana Prabhu ki, Jai.